Thomas Frank, author of Listen Liberal, and actually author of What's the Matter with Kansas. Thomas, thanks so much for joining me. How are you? We actually, looks like we may have lost him. Actually,
no, I'm right here. Can you hear me?
We have your audio, but we don't have your video. So I don't know if you can switch your video on, but we can hear you loudly and clearly. How are you today?
How about now?
Oh, there you go.
It's just my...
Absolutely. Okay. Listen, so I wanted to ask if you would, let's talk about Donald Trump's tax policy, right? Donald Trump's tax policy in the broader scheme of things, in the broader scheme of the economics that are happening right now, the neoliberal shift that you write about so succinctly over the last few years. What's your first take at Donald Trump's tax policy?
You know, it's more of the same. This is Republicans always do this. This is just, you know, the good old tax cut strategy again. Look, you know, something that I don't know why this is so difficult for a lot of the sort of major newspapers to understand. The Republicans don't really care about deficits. That's really not a concern to them. They're out to defund government, if you know what I mean. Remember Starve the Beast, right?
Yeah.
This is and cutting taxes is a twofer for them because it both rewards their most important constituents, the wealthy, and it defunds government, and they love it, you know, in all sorts of ways, and they're never going to stop doing it. And the fact that it makes the deficit much larger, that doesn't matter to them.
Yeah,
I mean, it matters a little bit, I imagine, but you know, not very much.
Well, so the tax breaks, it is a standard play. I had a chance to speak with Professor Adolph Reed of University of Pennsylvania. He said the exact same phrase. It's not a surprise.
Yeah, well, he's one of the great geniuses of our of analyzing our politics. You know, it's funny. And had we been listening to him, you know, 20 years ago, we wouldn't be in this situation right now.
So, but what this has done, though, Thomas, is that it has resurfaced the conversation that you would think would eventually go away, and that's the validity or invalidity of trickle-down economics, right? So the entire premise is that these tax cuts are going to stimulate the GDP, the economy, and the GDP is going to grow, and then we're going to recover anything that's going to cover the deficit.
I'm sorry, Mr. Dixon. I forgot to mention that's completely wrong. You know what? You know why I didn't even think of that? Because of course it's wrong, but they always roll this out. They always roll this out every couple of years, and I've got to the point where I don't even bother to, argue with it anymore. Everyone knows that's wrong.
But you would think that, right?
It's been wrong since the days of it's been wrong since the days of Calvin Coolidge, and it's still wrong. And what more can anybody say about it? It's been proven wrong again and again and again and again and again, and there's no point even talking about it anymore.
But it's back, and I understand your frustration, but it's literally back in the news right now. Like these tax cuts are going to bring revenues into the coffers. Like, I mean, I know for our progressive audience,
like goosing the economy. Yeah,
right. Voodoo economics, exactly.
Well, that's what they called it in the 80s.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
and that's what Republicans
they called it trickle down back in the 30s. You know, this is endless. Anyhow, that's not going to happen. This is done strictly for the two reasons that I just mentioned. It rewards the base and it defunds the state, and that's what it's all about for these guys. It's a perfect twofer for them in the most brutal political, the most brutal possible political sense, and the rest of it. Is that's just something they make up to sell the rest of us on. Of course that's not going to happen.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Right? I mean, I get it. I've been following it, studying it for some time. It's clear to anyone who actually pays attention, not so clear for people who may not be paying attention. But the second part of that you mentioned, which I think is key, is that it's really going to attack the state and what Professor Reed actually talks about quite a bit, which is the public good. It's really going to gut the public good. What I want to ask from you is, in the context of your work, right, you focused on this shift towards the right of the Democratic Party and how the Democratic Party is somewhat complicit in a lot of these economic policies that have been forwarded that are detrimental to the working class. What do you think is, you know, an easy question here first, but then I want you to dig into it. What do you think about the Democratic response, if any, to this economic policy when a lot of their donors will benefit from this tax break?
Well, you know, they oppose it, but it's always half-hearted with these guys. You know, look, the Democratic Party doesn't really they don't really know what they believe in anymore. You know, of course they're against it. You know, for a lot of reasons. You know, both good and bad. But they're you know, they're not adamant about it. It's not a critical thing for them. It's not really important. By the way, I want to throw one more thing in here, which is Trump. You know, we've always been saying, like, who is Trump's model? We've seen he steals phrases from Franklin Roosevelt. He stole his campaign strategy from apparently George Wallace or Pat Buchanan. But the president that he really seems to be modeling himself after is, of course, Ronald Reagan. You know, who is everything with Trump goes back to the '80s. You know, because of course that was his heyday. That's his great period.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my heyday too. By the way, you don't know that, but it was, and I was awesome in the '80s. Anyhow, me and Donald Trump. But one of the things that Reagan did was, as he cut taxes, he also increased. Now this is interesting. Increased spending. Okay, particularly on the military, and it ran the deficit up like massively. But it also goosed the economy. Now that works. When you increase public spending, you know, massive sort of Keynesian stimulus spending, that works. And I think Trump is aware of this. Now, Reagan famously did all his Keynesian stimuluses with the military, all of that gigantic military buildup in the 1980s. And what Trump has talked about is a national infrastructure program, which would have even more of a big effect. So the fact that he is cutting taxes and wants to do this infrastructure spending program at the same time, okay, that might work. Yep. The tax cut part of it doesn't really matter. That's going to just drive the federal government into deep into the red, into a big hole. But the spending part of it, that has the potential to work, and I hate to say this, to get Trump reelected. Really interesting. Yeah, if he think about it this way. One of the things that I encountered, and I'm going to go a little bit out of the way here. Do you remember in Listen Liberal, one of the questions that I asked when I was writing that book is, why do people love Bill Clinton? Why do Democrats, why do liberals love Bill Clinton? Because everything, you know, most of the actual policies he proposed, and you and I have talked about this before, most of the actual things he did legislatively as president were terrible. Okay, what do they like about him? And the answer, you know, you think about it and the answer leaps out at you. It's because the economy did really well in the late 90s, and real wages actually grew for the only time. I was born in the mid-60s. That's the only time since the 70s, in most people's lifetimes, that real wages grew was when Bill Clinton was president in the late 90s. And Trump we're real close to full employment right now in America. If he were to do something like that and just dump a ton of Keynesian stimulus on the economy right now, wages would grow. Yeah, this guy would. Let's hope he's not listening to this show. Wages would grow, and he would succeed.
So here's the interesting thing. I want to tie this in.
The tax cuts won't do it. The tax cuts won't do it, but the Keynesian stimulus will.
Yeah, that's the part that I wanted to bring up here, and I want to tie it into this question that we have from the Facebook audience that's watching. From Steve on Facebook. He said, for you, Thomas, if Republican policies are so openly hostile to the interests of regular people, why do people continue to vote for them? And I want to add a little flair here, right? Because
there's the $1 billion question. It is, man.
You wrote an entire book on it, you know. But here's the thing I want to add to it.
I've written 4 books on it. I write about this all the time.
Yeah.
This is okay. So Benjamin Dixon. Yeah. For me, this is the great question of our time. So, like I said, I was born in the mid-1960s, the heyday of the New Deal economy. You know, the economy was growing by leaps and bounds. Government was spending like crazy, you know. It was the golden age. Okay, this country and the rest of the Western world took this turn to the right. Beginning in the 70s, the late 70s, the early 80s, you know, a little earlier in some places like England, a little later in other places like France. But we all did it. and it's been manifestly bad for most people. Okay, it's been. I mean, the economy of the '60s, that's gone. And what we have now is a boom time for people at the top and stagnation for everybody else, and decay and, you know, crumbling cities and all that stuff. And, you know, in small towns and rural areas, the opiates, you know the whole story.
Right.
This is a democracy. We had to vote for that. We had to approve that change. And this is the question that has puzzled me my entire adult life. Why did we choose to go down that path? And why do we continue down that path, even when it's now so manifestly clear what a disaster it's been for most people? And I have tried to answer that question in book after book after book after book. Yeah. And, you know, we're all working on that. I mean, I hope to some degree, you know. Yeah, no, absolutely. So, Thomas, and look at it now. The only alternative appears to be, you know, here's Trump in this last election. By the way, the last election was fascinating, much more interesting than Trump as president. Trump as president is just another wrecking crew. You know, this is another, you know, George W. Bush, get out the sledgehammer and start whacking. You know, but when he was running last year, that was really interesting because he was presenting what seemed to be an alternative to neoliberalism, an alternative to this great right turn that we've been on. But it's an alternative that's like, let's go even farther to the right. But the same with Marine Le Pen. Right. Seriously, the same with Marine Le Pen in France. It's like she is presenting herself as an alternative to this. And, you know, it's funny. All my life, Benjamin, I have assumed that when people got sick of this great right turn that we've been going on since Thatcher, since Reagan, even since Carter, if you want to go back that far, but this great right turn that we've been on, that when it comes to an end, it will be people like you and me that finally get to, you know, or to sit at the levers of power. Yeah. You know, it'll be the left that gets that gets back in, but what it looks like now is that the only alternative, or I'm sorry, it's not the only alternative. The people who are much more effective at presenting themselves as an alternative is people like Trump. It drives me crazy. Right. You know? Right. Well, I almost want to call you Professor Frank because I've read so many of your books. No. I'm not a professor. No. But Thomas Frank, author of Listen Liberal, or Whatever Happened to the Party of the People. I want to get you back on so we can talk even more next time. We're at the top of the hour, so thanks so much for joining me. Hey, listen, I'll talk anytime you want, man. I'm at your service. Oh, thanks so much. I appreciate it.